Yeah, so you guys are live now. You can go ahead.
Okay. So, hello everyone, and as promised, welcome to this live webinar organized by the International Republican Institute, the Gambia office, and as you've seen the flyer, actually, we've been promoting it recently that we're going to, hold discussions with parliamentarians and as well members of the public, just different people from the society to have the opportunity to interact with their NAMs as in regards to matters relating to the draft constitution. As most of you know, the draft constitution was taken to Gazette in May. So before the referendum takes place, we expect that NAMs will, of course, hold different readings. And thereon, once it's agreed upon, 75% of the NAMs agree that they're good to go. Then it reaches the general public and then we'll hold a referendum. But before that process comes to play, we definitely need to understand what exactly is in the draft constitution. Before you vote for anything, you need to understand the details and matters that are really in that particular document. And so IRI, which is the International Republican Institute, has been in the country since 2017 to help in the reform agenda. So basically they've been working with civil society organizations, political parties, National Assembly members to just make sure that, we have a conducive environment and this transitional period that we are on is definitely going smoothly in accordance with international standards to consolidate democracy, but most importantly, human rights and rule of law. So my name is Fatou Muloshi, and unfortunately, we could not have the nominated member, Yakumba. We would have loved to have her here to gain, gauge her insights into what exactly she makes up of certain matters in this particular draft. But unfortunately, she's not with us. Notwithstanding, we have some people here who are all females, and they're actually my panelists for this particular discussion. And I'm pretty sure most of you know them actually because they've been in the forefront of, our democratization process, the transitional justice process. And definitely, I'm pretty sure they have a lot much more to say about what they make of some matters in the draft constitution. I'll allow them to introduce themselves, but I'll just give you an insight. We have Aisha Jammeh, who's from the Victim Center, also a youth leader and as well a women's rights advocate or a woman leader. We also have Zainab Sise. She is a community women's rights leader. Unfortunately, we were supposed to have Mohammed Sanding as well, but I assume he's a bit late. Hopefully he will join us before the end of the webinar because this will be for 2 hours. It looks like we've already gone 30 minutes into our time, but hopefully we can make do of what we have left. So before I do anything, I'd like to pass on the floor to Aisha. Introduce yourself to us, please. Aisha, we're not getting you your mic. You put your mic on mute. Yes.
Thank you for having me. Like you've said, my name is Aisatu Jammeh, but everyone calls me Aisha Jammeh. I work with the Victim Center, a founding member of the Gambia Center for Victims of Human Rights Violations, where I work now as a programs officer. I'm also an IVLP of Women Promoting Peace and Security in West Africa. And I'm currently working as a programs officer with the Victim Center. And yeah, so basically that's what I do. And I also support, I'm also a social worker where I support kids, basically, kids in SOS, basically. So that's what I do. Mm-hmm. And also a member of the OPI, Psychosocial Innovations Gambia, which we provide counseling and psychosocial support to victims, especially victims of sexual and gender-based violence.
Mm-hmm. Great, Aisha. So you're definitely an important stakeholder in this particular discussion. And so right after that, we have, of course, Zainab Sise. I'll allow you to also introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. Fatou. I make a rectification. It's not CISA, it's law. It's sustainable law. I like to make a rectification. It's not CISA, it's law.
No, okay, thank you for that. Okay, no worries.
So, like you said, my name is Zainab, what they call me Zainab Low.
Okay.
I was one of the founding members of the Gambia Center for Victims of Human Rights Violations, but now I'm working with another organization called Women's Association for Victims Empowerment, which is solely working to empower women, especially the victims, regardless of what it is. So I am very delighted to be part of this platform to talk about women's rights and especially persons with disabilities as well.
Okay, thank you so much, Senabulo. Now I'm not going to say, Senabulo, I beg your pardon. Thank you so much. And you're also welcome. Very important. Now, we're of course going to make this very interactive, and we're going to just discuss generally matters we feel are very much relevant to our general well-being as a people, just as a people actually, and as people very much concerned about the development of our country, taking into consideration the welfare, of course, of vulnerable groups and as well minorities. So we'll be monitoring comments as well on the page. As you can see, we're live on Kerr Fatou, and we'll want, of course, you, the viewers, to also pass on your comments and as well questions you might as well have for maybe members of the panelists actually to further discuss on. So if you have anything that you want to add onto the discussion while we get it going, you can put that on the comment section, and we have our technicians there who would help us get the comments. I'm also trying to monitor here so that we can be in line with what exactly is happening. We wanted to first of all start with, of course, you, the viewers who are watching this, to tell us what exactly you understand by, you know, what the draft constitution says about gender balance and, of course, the right of minority groups as provided in Schedule 2 or 3 of the draft constitution. While we put that question to you, actually, so that we can open the discussion with that. Meanwhile, I'm pretty sure most of you are trying to come in. You can, you know, think around that and see what exactly you have to add on in terms of what you make of, you know, the gender balance as catered for in the draft constitution, and as well the protection of rights of minority groups as well. But to the panelists, if you also have anything that you want to add on to this, I'd like to hear your take, starting with you, Aisha, are you ready for it? Because I do know that, you know, this draft constitution, to be honest, from what I see, actually has, in a way, catered for the inclusion of women, young people, and as well minority groups in the constitution, especially when it comes to occupying public places, public spaces. Typical example is the National Assembly, and that representation is very, very important, because this is why we expect decisions to be made, decisions concerning our livelihoods as a people. So having women, you know, being catered for in these different domains is very much important, Aisha. Your mic is on mute, okay.
So thank you again for having me. I think when it comes to issues of women, young people occupying important positions, it's very relevant, key position in the government, not just government, but also private institution as well. I think it's something that we really need to welcome as a country, because looking at other countries, for instance, I would just take maybe Senegal or other African countries like Rwanda, Uganda as well. They have young people that are holding key positions. Even in the National Assembly, you have people that are very young, as at 28, 29, holding key position. I think this is something that Gambia also needs to look into as well, because we have young leaders, we have people doing great stuff in the Gambia that are youths that can go into parliament and to ensure that that continues because we've seen what had happened in the past 22 years. We have the young people being marginalized. They've been, you know, I think the narratives has to change when it comes to young people getting into positions that that elderly people are manning. And then we've seen that how things are unfolding. We have seen what is happening currently in the government. We've seen the institutions are still the same. There's no institutional reforms. We still have same people holding the same positions that were here in the past 22 years. So I think those narratives has to change. Let's give the young people the space. Let's give them the opportunity to venture into these key positions and see. Let's give them 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, and see whether there will be no huge impact on giving them that opportunity to man these positions. I think especially women. Women are doing great stuff in the Gambia, and then they should be given that benefit to lead and see how well they will achieve a lot of things. Thank you.
Very well. Thank you, Aisha. I think that's a very important intervention there. And I will just shift to Senabu to maybe add on a few things in regards to that, because when you look at the demarcation of what exactly the draft says about, parliamentary seats, it says that we expected to see 71 members if this particular draft is passed. And part of that 71, 53 are going to be members representing each of the electorate constituencies, 14 women representing the regions, 2 from each of the 7 regions. What do you make of that?
Thank you. I would say I welcome this for giving women the platform. At least 2 women from each of the 7 regions would represent women. But still, I would say this is not enough, because out of 53 members, you have only 14 women representing women. And we know that we live in a patriarchal society these days. Women are sidelined, we're marginalized. So I would call for, people to, I'm not sure, this is a draft, I'm not sure we can do anything about it right now, but I think we would like to urge them to give women the chance to represent women, because as we know, as women are in the parliament, they tend to advocate for women more than men. Men don't usually advocate for women's rights, because women will push for women's rights to be advocated for. And I also like to talk about the PWDs, that's the persons with disabilities. They have only 2 representatives, which is not merely enough to represent people with disabilities. We know that in the Gambia, people with disabilities are marginalized. They don't usually hold key positions. And they have disabilities, but they have abilities as well. Some of them are more able than even those who don't have disabilities. So I think we should push for that as well, and give them, the platform to be able to advocate for themselves.
I mean, very, very, very important interventions there, because when you're talking about our issues, we know it better, so we can better represent ourselves if we find ourselves in such positions where we definitely will need to be, we need to voice out what we feel about matters concerning our development and our growth. And like you mentioned, someone else might agree with the fact that, 14 is indeed a small number. I don't know if Aisha, you agree with that same notion that out of 53, we could have, a larger demarcation for women. I don't know what you make of that, or you feel 14 is actually enough to reflect our plight as a specific demography.
I think I would agree with Zainab, as she rightly said. I think we could have more women representation in parliament, because right now what we've seen in the Gambia, like 22 years ago, and even now, women are more there to clap and then vote, and then at the end of the day, no question has been like, they don't go into office. So I think 14 is still very small for us to, we could do better. We could have even 50. If we would have 50, let like I said, let the narratives change when it comes to having more women representations in these positions. Because at the end of the day, just having few women, sometimes those few women cannot advocate for more like the rights of women, even if they do, but then the majority are, the majority are men. So at the end of the day, they end up just the majority carries the vote all the time. But then if we have more than 14 women in parliament, So all those women would stand for different rights of women. So at the end of the day, they will all come to, they will all agree that these rights of women are really important because they're the ones representing other women in parliament. So it'll be easier to achieve their goals, to ensure that the voices of women and girls are being included in whatever implementation of whatever is being implemented in the parliament.
And talking about other marginalized groups as well, and this would also include people with disabilities and other fragments of the society that constitute a minority, their inclusion in this process. So what would that mean for a more inclusive growth, and as well their participation in politics? Aisha, you take it on that, and then I move to Zainab.
Okay, I think when it comes to issues of women in this, like disabled people, differently able people, I call them, because those people, their rights, like they are less privileged people, and then I believe that if they are well represented in parliament, most of their issues will be addressed. Because at the end of the day, I have a friend who is differently able, who was in my class, and then sometimes when we have this discussion, when it comes to, there was a time they were supposed to vote for the disability bill, and then they had constraints of where and how they're going to vote for this bill. Because at the end of the day, it's not just disabled people living around the west, like the West Coast region, but then you have disabled people as far as Basse Koina. So how are those people going to be included, right? When it comes to taking the bill to parliament, whether those people will have, his frustration was whether those people in the other regions will be able to come and then be part of the voting of this bill. So you see, so if there were more representations of the differently able people in parliament, then their voices would be much more heard. Like look at our buildings, the buildings that we build in the Gambia, like they don't include the differently able people. They don't have ramps there. Like all they do, if a disabled person apply for a job whereby he or she has to climb stairs, it's going to be hard for the person. And most of the time, these are why they've been rejected for positions that have been, most of them, we have disabled people that went to university, right? But if they apply for position in buildings where they have to climb, that's an automatic no for them to get that application, because of the way and manner in which our buildings have been planned. Like it's not been included they are not being included in a construction, like the physical planning, the construction of buildings and stuff. So I think if we have more representation of the disabled, both women and men in parliament, it will be easier for them to also voice out most of their needs, and then especially when it comes to empowerment, we see most of them on the streets begging. Some will even use their kids, their children begging on the streets. So if there were better mechanisms of how to empower them, it will be easier for them to help themselves. Because so basically, let me just stop there and then leave.
Yeah, you've actually made a very good point, quite informative. And I think that is exactly the reason why the nominated member, Honorable Yasin, has been so much keen about, the disability rights bill, and on we've been going on this same bill. And, hopefully something positive can come out of this, because then it guarantees, their right to also be a part of the process, which is very much important for our development, because for development to be progressive, all these different segments must be, taken into consideration and catered for. I think that's a very valid point. And before I come to you, Zainab, or you have anything to add on that quickly, so that I can remind the viewers once again what we're discussing and how they can participate.
Yes, thank you, Aisha. I think you made very valid points about persons with disabilities, because here it says 2 persons with disabilities will be represented, and they would be selected from their federation. So I would like to urge political parties to please give these persons with disabilities the platform to be able to stand there, to be elected for their constituencies. Because like Aisha said, we don't cater for them in whatever we do, like jobs, even transportation, you know, elections. They don't have, like, we met we met a lady, I wouldn't call her name, but we met her in SL. She's a person with disability, she has kids. There's this quote I would like to share from her. She said, Auma, Munuma, they can file a woman. The Amnanja board. When we asked her, she doesn't have an ID card, she doesn't have any documentation that would present her as a Gambian, but she doesn't even have the help in the society. They're stigmatized, they're marginalized, because I think the government should be able to provide for them, to give them that platform to be able to advocate for one another. So we would like to ask the political parties as well to give them that platform, to push them to be able to, you know, stand for elections in their constituencies, rather than just taking 2 representatives from the federation.
Very, very, very important there. And just to kind of remind you, the viewers, that you can definitely take part in this conversation by writing your comments down in the comment section below, and maybe sending questions or adding your voice to the discussion. We're discussing the draft constitution, which has been gazetted in May. And of course, before the referendum takes place, parliamentarians need to take a look at it. And of course, you know, argue, debate on it. And then before it's sent to the general public through the IEC. Most of you know that since 2017, the Constitutional Review Commission was set up by an act of parliament, 2017, to see that a new constitution that reflects the plight and rights of the citizenry is indeed developed for the general good. So I believe we all have a take, we all have a say in this process. So if you have anything that you want to add on that, make sure you do it in the comment section below, and we'll be taking note. We'll be discussing a lot of other issues, because since, you know, the Constitutional Review Commission went on their travels and held community outreach and discussed with the general public, a lot of issues came about, and quite a lot of contentious issues around secularism, you know, citizenship, term limit. And these are all very important issues that we definitely need to discuss. And we'll be talking about the term limits now, because as you all know, I'm sure my panelists are aware that the draft constitution is actually advocating for a 2-term limit. And I mean, just to start off with you, Zainabu, what do you make of this? What do you make of the 2-term limit? How does it, you know, contribute to a more inclusive and progressive development?
Thank you. I think this is a very keen conversation when we talk about term limits, because we don't want a repetition of what has happened in the last 22 years, where a leader would just sit and sit and sit and sit on that chair and don't want to leave. So giving someone the chance to sit for 2 terms, I think, is enough for you to execute whatever you have to execute and pass it on to someone else. So it would curb that culture of nepotism, because it recycles the people.
Yeah.
You understand? It doesn't. For example, we know how it is here. If you are in a position, you tend to bring in people that you know. Like we say in this government, they're still recycling people from the other regime. Yes. So in this draft, it says 2 terms, and the incumbent will, the current term of the incumbent is considered as his first term. So for example, if Barrow is supposed to go for election and he wins, he only has another term to participate in whatever he's doing. So I think it's very good for Africans, especially Gambians, to start this culture of taking 2 terms and then someone else sits. Because we have talented people, we have people who have a lot of ideas. So one person just ruling the country for 10 years is enough. That just having someone sit on end and not move away from that seat, it brings, this is how, I think it curbs tyranny as well and dictatorship. It stops people from being a dictator or a tyrant. So I believe this is the way forward. It's welcomed as well.
Very much welcome indeed. And would you also agree to that, Aisha, the 2-term limit, and why it's so much of an importance to us as Gambians? And all of a sudden, everyone is talking and saying, yeah, 2-term limit is actually very much welcomed, apparently because we've learned our lesson from our previous regime. What's your take?
Well, that is the most, I think, is the most interesting topic currently that the Gambia is going through right now. I guess I'll agree with my fellow panelists with regards to the 2-term limits.
Yeah.
America is it's a country whereby we could look up to, right? Because we've seen they always, when the 2-term is over, a new government will come in, a new president will come in. But then in Africa, and Gambia most especially, we've seen how Gambia had been the Gambia for 22 long years, right? And then he has violated the rights of Gambians for the past 22 years, and then too many killings. Like, you know, he came in 1994, he did a coup d'etat, and Gambians thought the military rule would have been better for Gambia. But then at the end of the day, it was a different story. And right now we have a new president, and then I will always say he could have been the best president that Gambia would have. But then we've now seen this, you know, this issue of going again for another term, which I think as Gambians, we should sit down again and rethink again as Gambians, for us not to make the same mistake again, because what had happened the past 22 years could actually repeat itself, because we've seen same things that are still happening, like again. So I think we should ensure as Gambians to see that we have this broad discussion when it comes to the term limit of presidents that we would vote in, right? So at the end of the day, it will always comes back to us, and then it will always comes back to us, and then we are the very ones that will suffer the consequences. So they will just come and then be presidents and then violate the rights of citizens, and then they will still want to be in office. So I think we should say no to it as Gambians, especially I'll just call out to all the women, the women who will always go and vote for these people to sit in power. Let's say no to it. Let's put our hands on deck and say, this is the term limit of our presidents. And then when that term limit is over, then you move and someone else comes. We have fresh people with fresh minds, people with fresh ideas. If you cannot complete something, let's give way to someone else to come and complete what you've started. If that person also term limit ends, someone also comes, let the person also continue. That is how a country develops. That is how a country looks like Singapore, for example. So I guess that's just the bottom line.
Yeah, I mean, very important. So you were saying that you agree with that particular section and provision, and you would want your NAM to vote for that particular segment.
Yeah.
So you are in for the term limit. I mean, it's good, because then it gives more diversity and allows, you know, equal chances and equal participation as well, you know. We've seen how the previous regime was like, and it's indeed not the very example we'd like to see coming, you know, years coming. And so I think there's a lot of lesson we can learn from that. And I think with 2 terms, of course, 10 years, I think it's quite a lot that we can agree with, definitely going forward. So I think those are very good arguments. And if you want to add your voice to that in terms of whether you think the 2-term limit is very important and it should stay as per the draft, you can leave that in the comment section and let us know what you're also thinking about that. And let's not also forget that now the draft constitution is also saying that, you know, the National Assembly or the National Assembly would definitely have to take part in the appointment of certain key positions, which of course include position of some ministers, the Chief Justice. I mean, how does that consolidate, you know, reconcile with fair treatment and the rule of law, taking into consideration that, you know, we have an incumbent, but then we have again a parliament which is responsible for the making of laws, but then again they're there to take part in the appointment of these people who are holding critical positions in government and in our country, taking into consideration that these are also people who come from divergent political views. What's your take on that, Senabu?
For me, I think it would enhance the independence of service delivery. Because if, for example, the president uses his executive powers to appoint or terminate someone's appointment, it doesn't tell well. I think that power should be given to the National Assembly to be able to vet the persons we are given these institutions to look after or to look into. They have to be people that are of integrity. They have to be people that can hold the best interest of the people at hand. Yeah. They don't just have to hold positions just for the sake of holding positions. Like we've seen so many, for example, let's go back to the past region, in Jammeh's region. We've seen so many incompetent people holding up positions that are not for them to hold. And in the end, they tend to, destabilize the institution. Because all of these problems we're having now is because Jammeh was holding executive powers to do whatever he wanted to do. It all revolved around him. Mm-hmm. So I think this would also curb, it would diminish a bit of that executive power the president has, because the National Assembly holds a lot of executive powers as well. So if the National Assembly is part of those vetting or appointing ministers, I think it's a very welcomed idea. And I think also the general public should also be part of the vetting process, because this is Gambia and we all know each other. So I think this is one of the positives of the draft constitution.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Aisha, what do you have to add on that? Because doesn't this limit the powers of the executive or the president? It kind of empowers, the National Assembly members in a way. How does that reconcile with fair treatment and, of course, checks and balances?
I think what my colleague had said, I think I'll quite agree with it, because at the end of the day, Jammeh was actually just getting anyone to hold positions in the country, key positions in the country. So if the same thing has to happen again, so Gambia, we're doomed, right? I guess we could, if there's a if there's a key position in the government, let's open it to able Gambians, people that have the qualifications to apply. But it just doesn't have to be, picking cherries and then putting them in those key positions whereby the individual is not competent to hold those positions. So I think it should be vetted. Not just anyone could just come in being selected by the president and then say, okay, you man this position for me because of long-term sake, because of favoritism or whatever. So I think it just has to be that the idea is let it go to parliament, let them do checks and balances of that individual, whether the person is really the one to hold that position or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the president can, in a nutshell, appoint as per the draft constitution, but it will have to be approved by the National Assembly. And you are saying that actually goes right in love with checks and balances, and it's a way that we can, of course, prove competence.
Yes.
I mean, okay, and let's also hear what the comment section will probably add on to that. I don't know if because I do know that this is not something that it's not part of the debate that we've been hearing often. I'm not sure if it's been happening, but as a journalist, I don't think people are really very much aware of this particular one. And I think it's very much important that they also add their voice to it. Let us know what you think about parliamentarians and the executive working hand in glove when it comes to appointment of ministers and as well the Chief Justice, whether that's a good idea there. And I'll reserve my comments though, because I think I stand to be neutral here, but yeah, I think it's not a bad idea if it promotes checks and balances and definitely contribute to a progressive development, because then somebody needs to be checking the other. So it goes hand in hand. But we also have other things that we need to discuss as well. Sainabou, because we also have the Bill of Rights, which of course, talks about how people just generally from different backgrounds, regardless of breed or where you come from, whether you're male or you come from a different part of the society, you have the same right to participate and take part like any other person in the country. And so I think the Bill of Rights generally is important, because these things like Bill of Rights are developed in accordance with universal standards. So I believe as human beings or as citizens of the country, it is important that we look forward to provisions like this. I do not know what you think of that, Aisha. Yeah, okay.
Sorry. I think the Bill of Rights in every constitution is always key, because individuals, we all have our individual rights, but also we also have other rights that are governed by our country's constitution. For example, the right to assemble, right? All those are rights that we have as citizens of the Gambia. So I think it's really important that, because I always take 22 years rule of Jammeh as an example. There's certain things that you could not do, right? Like you cannot just assemble, and then at the end of the day, what's going to happen is they're going to arrest you, and they're going to detain you. We've seen the TJ process that is going on, especially the TRC. Most of the people they were being arrested, detained without going through, proper court ruling. It was just a matter of them assembling, to ensure that some of the things that Jammeh put in place, like electoral reforms. We've seen people being arrested and tortured because of their rights to assemble. They went to assemble to fight for something, and then they've been arrested and detained. So I think it's key that we have all those. It's key that we have all those in the constitutions, just to ensure that people are free when it comes to the rights that is being provided for them in the constitution.
And of course, to you, Sainabou, how does this contribute to the participation of, just generally members of the society, especially vulnerable groups, without fear? Because taking into consideration where we came from, like what she just mentioned, Aisha, it wasn't easy for someone to just come out and speak their mind, for someone to think it's okay to be a part of any association, to feel that much emboldened and empowered to just basically, criticize development issues. But now we see that happening, and now the Constitution, in a way, would advocate for that. How do you see that? And do you think, it's important for us to have this in order for vulnerable groups to come out and voice out without fear?
Thank you. I think this is one of the most important parts of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, because it protects the fundamental human rights of the masses, of the populace. It enables them to be able to speak the truth to power, to demand for equal leadership, accountability, to be able to advocate for their leaders to be held accountable. So it will help them to exercise their rights without fear and be able to, like Aisha said, be able to have a freedom of assembly. I think it would also educate the masses on what their rights are and what their responsibilities are as citizens of a nation. Because without the citizens, there is no nation. These people that are sitting in key positions or in institutions are there to serve the populace. Because before you sit there, it is people that go out and exercise their rights to vote and give you that power to be able to sit in whatever position you are. So you are there to serve them. You are there to serve at the best interest of the people. So I think it is very, very, very important. This is the most important part of it. And I think this is part of what we do to be able to advocate, because we cannot live in a society where there are mass human rights violations. So this would at least curb that sense of violating people's rights like we had in the past regime. Like we all know, we are not in the TRRC, and we have had so many, heinous crimes being perpetrated on people, because most of these people do not even know what their rights are. You violate someone's right and they don't even know that it's a violation. So promoting the fundamental of human rights of people, it's very key. And we also welcome the establishment of the National Human Rights Commission, where people can go and, just give reports of whatever violations they have, and they will take it because it's an independent body. It doesn't answer to anyone. It's an independent body, and I think they can take up this job very well. Thank you.
So would you want your National Assembly or the National Assembly members to actually vote in for the Bill of Rights, and why? Let me continue from you, Senabu.
I would urge them to vote for the Bill of Rights, because like I said, this is the most important part of it, because without the Bill of Rights, we don't have a stable country. We don't have a stable nation. People live in fear, and it's bad for the development of the country. It's bad for the economy of the country. It's bad for the whole state. So I would urge the NAMs to please vote for the Bill of Rights and be able to implement it fully, and see that Gambians, know what their rights are, and be able and are able to just go out there and exercise it without fear and without being, just being manipulated to do whatever the state or state actors want them to do. So I would urge the NAMs to please, vote for this Bill of Rights.
Very well. I'm sure they're hearing you, and if they don't, they'll come back to the video and get that part. And you as well, Aisha. What do you make of it? You want your NAMs to vote in for that, and why?
The NAM should of course vote for the Bill of Rights, because Gambians have been silent for 22 years, right? People were scared. People were terribly scared. Even to, you will even have a missing person, like you will never come out to speak. You literally, I'll just take myself as an example. My family have been quiet for 14 years. We've never came out to speak about the disappearances of my father because of, the circumstances, what would happen to us, what if they come after my family. So I think that is the most important aspect of the constitutions, when people are being empowered, like the freedom of speech, freedom of expression. So that is how a country, moves forward from being dictatorship to a country free of human rights violations. Because right now we've seen, we have a democratic state, everyone is free to talk about anything, everyone is free to criticize, and that is how a country should be. Right, we've seen in the other countries of the world, people will come out. Senegal, for example, people will come out and say they will even host shows to have a debate on certain issues that is happening in their country. So I think Gambia, we are moving towards that. We are now moving towards that, and then we've seen how free people are, how people come out to advocate for things to change. We've seen recently the police officer that was being showed on, who was on the traffic. And then so all those things help Gambia to move from one point to another. And I think the National Assembly, I would urge them to really vote in for it, because it has liberated Gambia from where we were to where we are at now.
Yeah. Very well. And do you think it should actually come with certain limitations? And if yes, what would that be?
Well, for now, I think we're good to go, because limitations also, sometimes if you put limitations to certain things, it might not favor us, the citizens, because at the end of the day, governments will always look at their own interests, right? governments, we all know that that is always what happens, even not just in the Gambia, but even in other countries. We've seen governments will put limitations to things that will favor them, but not things that will favor its citizens. So I think for now, let's just hold those limitations aside and then just have it as they are now, and then we will see what's going to happen.
And what about you, Senabu? What do you have to add on that?
I will concur with what Aisha has said. Let's hold on to the limitations for now.
Well then, I think a lot of people that are listed would very much agree with you, because honestly, there's nothing more pleasing than being able to voice yourself out, even though we should be responsible in doing so, because we have to make sure that it goes up in accordance with the laws of the land. I do not think we should be censored or have any form of sense of fear in trying to voice out issues, especially that related to the development of the country. So every person, every member of the society definitely deserves that particular right. But before we even get into what exactly you would want the NAMs to take on when they have the opportunity to finally do the readings, because they will definitely need to debate and pass their judgments. Let's also talk about some of the issues that have been for quite a long time been a contentious issue, and in a certain way the Constitution kind of put those issues at rest. This includes secularism, which would you say, let me go to you, Aisha. Do you agree with the way the issue of secularism has been put to rest in the Constitution?
Sorry. Can you hear me now? So with the issue of secularism, I think for me, my take on that secularism is that I think more awareness raising needs to be done when that aspect of secularism, because I do talk to people with regards to that section in the Constitution that talks about secularism. So I think a lot of people don't get what it means. The word, right? Because sometimes if you ask someone, okay, what do you think about the secularism thing? So a lot of people think it's about Christianity and Islam, right? All the time people get to miss that, right? So I think people need to know really what secularism in the Constitution means, right? Because a lot of the time, like I said, if you ask Mr. A will tell you, this is about gay rights, this is about them promoting gayism in our country, this is about them promoting lesbianism in our country, which is not the case. I think for me, it's just about people understanding it better, because the Constitution is not just for one portion of people in the Gambia, but it's for the entire Gambia. And I believe that people need to get a better understanding of what it really means. So being in a Constitution, what it means, and not being in a Constitution, what it means. So I think I'll just stop there for now, because I always want to reserve my points when it comes to talking about this issue of secularism, because it always raises eyebrows when
form of discussion.
It always raises eyebrows when people, because like I said, a lot of people don't understand what it really means being in the Constitution. So I think we need to be enlightening more. So I would like to suggest that the National Human Rights Commission should, the CRC should ensure that people get to understand it more. I know they've done a lot of awareness raising, radio talk shows, blah, 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 but I think more needs to be done, because when you talk to someone in the locals might not understand it well as someone who has vast experience when it comes to constitutions and things like that.
And I think that's why the discussion is very much important, because you have, like we've discussed the other time in the training, you have certain members of society who just get a word and then they try to, interpret it in a whole lot of ways to different people. And then they also, it's easy for negative news to transport report faster than positive news. So I think those are one of the misconceptions, people understanding the terminology and what exactly it means, because it's just an English word that has its own definition. And I think the Constitution has indeed pretty much defined what exactly secularism is without even mentioning the word. And Zainab, what's your own argument on this?
I think, like Aisha has said, this has been a topic of discussions in many places. People don't actually know what secularism is, but I think we need to break the word down. We need to break it down to the layman's understanding, to be able to understand what secularism is. Because the draft constitution, it refrains from mentioning the secular nation of the Gambia, but provides a framework to ensure all religions and faiths are treated equally. So here it means that it bans the establishment of a state religion and prohibits the National Assembly and the President of the Republic to institute a state religion in the Gambia. Like we know back then, in Jammeh's regime, there was a point he declared the Gambia an Islamic state.
Exactly.
And, yes, he declared the Gambia an Islamic state, and we might just say it. We don't just have Muslims in the Gambia. We have Christians as well, and everybody is considered to be a Gambian as far as you're exercising your rights, you're voting or whatever. So it refrains that power for the government or the National Assembly to be able to declare a nation a secular state. So I think there needs to be more awareness raising, like Aisha has said. People don't actually understand what secularism is. For me, example, when I heard it in the first place, I was lost. So I had to do a lot of reading to be able to understand what it means. But how many people have the opportunity
of course,
to be able to go there and read what the draft constitution says? So they should be able to continue the awareness raising. It should not stop. It should be, broken down so people understand what it means. Because when people are voting for the referendum, they need to know exactly what is on the draft constitution before they say yes or they say no. So breaking it down would also help that as well. Thank you.
Of course, it's very important. And I like the way it's just been, even though I do not think like putting a word like secularism should really be a big issue, because it's just a word that, represents very important things in our development, in promoting human rights. But the way the draft has also put it, it does not mean actually that it's promoting gay, it's promoting Islam, it's promoting Christianity, because the Constitution in itself has clearly made its stance on that. So I think in trying to, please different segments of society who held divergent views on this particular issue, they were able to lay that nicely in a way that will not spark another form of debate about the same issue. And of course, we cannot also go without talking about the citizenship and what the draft says about it as well, in terms of how one becomes a citizen and how one can acquire citizenship. And this draft is also saying that once your grandparent is a citizen, you are eligible to become one. What do you make of that, Aisha? So say I was born in America and, I was never born in America though. And then my grandparents were actually Gambians. I am eligible to be a Gambian.
Okay, well, I think for me, I think with maybe for my personal opinion when it comes to who becomes a citizen, I think it's really important that it was included in the Constitution, as if your grandparents are like Gambians, automatically become Gambian. Because we've seen 22 years ago, we've seen people joining our military that were not Gambians, and then they were being provided ID cards, they've been provided voters card to vote, and that was what kept us having a dictator for that long, because people keeps on coming, and then they'll be called Gambians. Sometimes we see people, obviously you would know that, okay, this person, is he really Gambian? But then at the end of the day, the person will tell you Gambian. But also another on another side of it is also that we've seen people who have like moved to Gambia. Like their parents have moved to Gambia, and then they were born in Gambia, they were raised in Gambia, they went to school in Gambia, they're educated in Gambia, you know, they're working in Gambia, and they're paying tax in Gambia. And then sometimes most of them will tell you, okay, like basically I'm now Gambian. Some of them will even marry a Gambian and live in Gambia, right? And they will have kids in Gambia. So they're like not going back to where they came from. So I think we should also have this conversation around how are we going to incorporate those people? You know, how are we going to incorporate them? Because they're also contributing to the economy of the country, right? So this is my personal opinion with regards to what I think about, you know, those people. Because most of them, when you talk to them, they will tell you, okay, I was born in Gambia, my parents came, or my grandparents came, even my parents were born in Gambia. But up till now, we cannot even have, like, I applied for citizenship, and up till now, I cannot have my citizenship, and I would love to stay in Gambia, especially some of which their parents are they're school teachers in Gambia, and then they contributed, like I said, towards the development of the country. So I think we should rethink again, even if they are not going to be given full citizenship, but at least something, we should consider something for them, because they've also contributed in so many things in Gambia. We've seen Gambians having companies in Gambia, and then they will even hire Gambians to work in those companies. So, and then, like I said, paying tax as well, that is also contributing towards the development of the Gambia. So providing job opportunities for the youth. So I think all those things needs to be, we need to look into it again to see how best we could also cater for them when it comes to their well, not giving them full citizenship, but then also reconsider them in a way to see how, you know, the legislatives should sit and then, you know, brainstorm around all of these things and then see how best they would at least help them with, you know, something that they could proudly say, you know, I'm also part of Gambia.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure most of them are actually proud to say that. And I hope we're giving our NAMs an idea of exactly what would want them to discuss once they get opportunity to do the reading once again, because one can also become a citizen by registration. Like you mentioned, there are people that are working in the country, you know, for quite a long time, and they really want to get that citizenship, but they're unable to. Now the Constitution is saying instead of even 7 years, if you live in the country for about 5 years and you're able to show a proven track record of, you know, good behavior, you can actually acquire citizenship by registration if you marry a Gambian citizen. Would you say, Zainab, that's a fair one there?
Yeah, my point exactly, because that was where I was going to hit on.
Okay.
Draft Constitution says a person can acquire a Gambian citizenship by birth,
yeah,
and by naturalization. Naturalization means if you lived in the Gambia for more than 15 years and 18 years above, and you have a good character, you're eligible to be a Gambian by birth. We all understand that if you were born in the Gambia by either of your parents are Gambian.
Yeah.
But I have reservations when it comes to the registration part, where it says if you have been married to a Gambian citizen for more than 5 years.
Okay.
So let's look into that. For example, we have non-Gambians in here. I think we have to protect our women. You know, someone might want to acquire a Gambian passport or Gambian citizen and gets married to a person for 5 years, dumps you and gets citizenship. So I think for me, my personal take on that is the term limit on that should be about 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, we know that the rate of divorce in the Gambia is skyrocketing, and we don't want to put our girls and our women out there just to be there just for the benefits of it. So I think for me, my personal take is let's up the term limit on that. Let's make it 10 to 15 years, like naturalization, because we've seen in other countries.
Isn't that quite a lot?
People just get married just for the papers
already. Okay.
Yes, so my personal take on that is let's review that.
Okay.
5 years. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll put a nice strike to that. Actually, let's review that. That's your own take. But yeah, so before we even go further, I've been seeing comments saying that we probably need to have another edition of this in local languages because it is a very important and open discussion, and more people need to understand what we're saying. I hope that Lala and team are taking note of that. And we also have, of course, people saying that they believe the 2-term limit is good. So Aisha and Zainabu, they agree with you that the 2-term is indeed very good for presidents to do whatever they can in that particular time frame and leave. And we have also secularism, of course. When you talk about secularism, people always bring in comments about that, and we have, of course, people talking about understanding secularism. But I believe we were able to make you understand exactly how the Commission has actually put this issue of secularism to rest by just catering for the different segments who basically were not agreeing on this particular issue without doing any harm. And so moving on, before we even wrap up, because we have about maybe 20 minutes or so, and I would just like us to talk about exactly the importance of a referendum. For those who do not know what a referendum is, I should do us the honor of telling them what exactly we mean by a referendum and what is expected of them as citizens in this particular constitution, development of this constitution process. Okay, Zainabu, you take on that. Yeah.
Okay, so after, what a referendum here means is after the draft has been presented and gazetted and then being presented to the National Assembly, it has to pass through the form of being referendum. Referendum here means it has to be taken to all the regions for everyone to vote again, to say yes or to say no against everything that is on the constitution, on the draft constitution. So here the referendum, voting on the referendum is very crucial because most people are laymen, like we said, the issue of secularism. People don't understand it. You go to the other regions, you go to the, let's say, Basse, Pansang, the upper regions, the lower regions. People don't actually understand what is on the draft constitution. So we have to be able to break it down to their understanding before they say yes or no, because this is going to govern everyone in the country, whether we it or not. It's a constitution and it sets the rules and the directives on how the Gambia is going to be governed. So these are rules, and once they are passed, they cannot be taken back.
Of course.
So I think passing the referendum here is very crucial, and I think a lot of awareness raising needs to be done on that. People need to understand exactly every bit and piece of this constitution before we say yes to it. So here the referendum is very keen because everybody is part of the process. It makes there's inclusivity for everybody to be part of the process in the draft constitution being passed as a law in the Gambia. So I think it needs to be broken down in every language that is possible, and people need to be interested in what is on the referendum. You don't just have to see a gathering where they say the CRC would come, or the National Assembly, or whoever is responsible for it to come and say we're here to vote for the referendum, and people just come and say yes, yes, yes. You might be saying yes to something that might be bad for you. So people need to be able to understand what the referendum is and what the Constitution says before they say yes or they say no. Because if there are more votes to yes than no, you might be doomed. So I think people should be able to understand it and have a voice, have a say in the whole process. Yeah.
Very important. And Aisha, what you also have to add on that, because it's important that when it's time for the referendum, that people come out and vote either yes or no. And so it's a very crucial process in leading us to the government giving his assent. So if we do not take part in the voting process, it becomes difficult, and we need over a majority for the government to actually put that particular constitution into consideration. Your take?
I agree with what Zainab said with regards to people getting to know what they're voting for, because it's really important that after the whole process of working on a constitution, and then it's about to go in for referendum, and then people actually are like, okay, what am I gonna go for yes, or am I gonna go for no? So I think it should be broken down into pieces, and people need to understand what's in there and what they're voting for, whether I'm going in for something that would endanger me in the next few years to come. So they need to be sure, they need to know what really they're voting for. And I think that could only be done when more awareness raising around the Constitution has been, it's been done. People should be in the, like, it should be led by citizens of the country, right? People need it. It needs to be inclusive, because inclusiveness, all the time, inclusiveness. When something is being inclusive, that is when it is much more successful. But when something is not that inclusive, it's less successful. So I think we should make it as inclusive as possible, ensure that it's driven by citizens, it's driven by the people, right? The people it's going to govern at the end of the day. So I agree totally that awareness raising should be done. People need to know what in there, what they're voting for, to ensure that it's transparent, and then to ensure that at the end of the day, this is something that we will always look and say, yes, I have actually contributed in the constitution of my country, right? Because we cannot have a constitution whereby it's just a constitution that was drafted, and at the end of the day, you as a citizen, you have not contributed anything in it. So I think as a good patriotic citizen, it's important that your voice is in your constitution. It's in the constitution of your country. So I think I'll just stop there for now, and then, you know.
Yeah. Oh, I think it's a fulfilling moment. I want to be able to sit and say I have at least taken part in the constitutional development process, in the constitutional process of my country, development process, if that makes sense, of my country. And I believe it's something that every other person should be proud of. I've not taken part in any referendum before. I don't know if both of you should have taken part in the past, and how was that experience like? If you want to share with that briefly, just so maybe our members of the public can know that what exactly is in it. Yeah. Aisha, Zainabu. Let me go to Zainabu now. I love the Aisha name too much. Yeah. So Zainabu, you took part in referendum before. How was that like?
Unfortunately, no, I have never taken part in a referendum, but I'm very much looking forward to taking part in this, because I have taken my time to read what the draft says. And if I don't want it, I'll be very glad to say no. So I urge everyone to partake in it. And I also want to say something. People have to be able to ask questions. People need to be interested in this. We just don't have to just sit there and, don't care. We have to be able to ask questions, just to know what's going to happen.
Of course.
Because we don't want a repetition of what has happened in the past 22 years. So I urge everyone as a Gambian out there to ask questions, be included in the process, just, have that sense of being a Gambian, and don't wait for the government to educate you on your civic rights and duties. Be able to partake in all of.
Yeah.
You should at least find a chance to go to them, ask the questions. And also I urge people like us who know a bit about these things to be able to talk to other people and educate them on what the draft constitution says so far, because it will take to 2021 before the referendum will be passed.
Very, very important that. That is to say, it will be our fault if we allow what happened in the past to reoccur. And Aisha, what would be your take on the importance of, I mean, you know, or let me say, did you take part in a referendum before, and how was that like? You did not. I'm guessing you did not.
I have never taken part in any referendum before, and I'm looking forward to take part in this referendum. And I'm also urging every Gambian to also be part of it, because it's something that will govern the country. It's something that will govern its citizens. So I think every patriotic Gambian and everyone who is proud to be a Gambian, you should take part in this referendum, this referendum process, because it's going to be history, like for you. Because at the end of the day, if we, you tell your kids, sometimes, some years back, I took part in the referendum of voting in the referendum of the country's constitution. So I think it will be history to you. So I think it's really important for everyone to be part of it. Because at the end of the day, it will govern this country, and we would not want another dictatorship rule in the Gambia. So let's ensure that this is something that we work toward.
I mean, quite a challenge facing NAMS ahead, and somebody on the comment section, Mas Shati, also agrees with that he or she believes that NAM should really educate the people about the importance of this, and as well, the media should also do exactly that. And I think that's very much important in our way towards the referendum. And so you would all agree with me that we are definitely now banking our hopes on the NAMs, and just to see what exactly they would say, or they would agree or disagree on. But just to ask you before we go, what do you expect from them? What would you want your NAMs to particularly consider and be very much cautious about when it comes to passing their judgment on this particular draft? Zainabu.
Thank you once again. I would urge the NAMs, all of them, especially the women, to push for the rights of women, push for equal representation in the National Assembly, as well as the PWDs, persons with disabilities, because they are not enabled, they are just disabled. So my last word to the NAMs is consider women and the PWDs when it comes to National Assembly and matters relating to the masses, especially women and persons with disabilities. So it would make Gambia a much better place if we consider women and the persons with disabilities.
Well, certainly it looks like it's not going to be an easy ride there. But yes, Aisha, what would be your take on it in regards to what exactly you would want the NAMs to consider and probably very much pay attention to?
The NAMs to consider basically I want them to consider things that has to do with women and girls, and even men. It's not just about women and girls, but even men. We have men whose rights have been violated in Gambia. So basically, let them look at issues. Let them not look at party lines, but let them consider things that is for the benefit of Gambians as a whole. Because at the end of the day, it's people voted for them to take those seats. So at the end of the day, they need to ensure that things that are affecting those people, both men, women, children, and girls, should be pushed forward to ensure that all those people, their voices have been heard. They would ensure that these people would know that the NAMs that we've actually voted for have not failed us. So I think the bottom line is they need to put their integrity forward, right? Because at the end of the day, it's all about integrity. Like I always say this, integrity is key to any position someone is manning, right? If you're manning a position because of you have that integrity and people have trust in you, that is why they say, even if I cannot be in this house, but then the person that I'm voting for to take up this position with will actually take up some of our issues to that parliament to ensure that the parliament votes for it. So I think that the NAMs, they have, I would not call it a war, but they have a huge task ahead of them. And then their people are looking at them, and their people are looking at what decision they're going to make at the end of the day. So I think that these NAMs need to make sure that the people are looking at them, and then for them not to feel that those people, they need to make things right. They need to ensure that those people will not, look down on them at the end of the day. So I think they really need to, consider the fact that people out there voted them in, and people out there wants them to do something that is right.
Consider, because at the end of the day, we are all working towards the same thing, and that is the development of the country. And we have to make sure that we put that at the back of our minds before anything. Before I go, do you have any last words that you would want to say? Any word of advice to the general public, because the referendum would be here soon, and it just depends on how many, how long parliamentarians take to finish their deliberations, but it's soon. It will be here soon. June is not far, so we're expecting that to be here soon. So we have to start preparing ourselves towards the process and grab a copy of the draft and make sure that we know exactly what's in it, because it's very much important in shaping our decisions towards that particular voting. So just in case you have anything you want to add on that briefly as your last words before we go, I will start with you again, Aisha.
All right, thank you again, Fatima, for having us all. So my last word, this is something that I always say to myself, and this is something that I always say to people that I talk to. I always say that it's not yet a new Gambia for me until when I see all of these, all the TJ processes that Gambia is going through have been achieved. Let's say the TRRC, let's say the constitutional review, let's say the institutional reforms, because these institutions were being set, their act of parliament being set to ensure that it's a never again. So achieving this never again, making sure that we achieve this never again slogan, we need to ensure that all these processes are done in a correct manner, right? So I always say that it will only be a new Gambia for me when all of these processes have happened in a right way, not being selective, like there shouldn't be selective justice in all of these processes. So it will only be a new Gambia for me when all these processes happen, when the Constitution goes in a referendum, and then when the TRRC wraps up this work, recommendations are made, and then the recommendations are implemented by the government, and when we have institutional reforms, when we have people that were serving in the former government who have been named alleged perpetrators, to be, the background checks need to be done on those people. The perpetrators, alleged perpetrators who has committed gruesome human rights violation towards Gambian, to be brought to books, to be brought to justice. Victims also getting redress, and women that were being sexually abused. Also, these platforms need to be created for these women to also ensure that, their rights have been violated, to get justice for these victims. And as well as the National Human Rights Commission also, it's something that the Gambia is looking like they are going to take forward the human rights situation of the Gambia in the coming years, right? So I'll also commend them to also ensure that things that were happening in the past 22 years in the Gambia should stop happening. So we've seen police brutality happening. So they should also sit and then look into their act again to ensure that all these police brutalities that are happening, all the torture that are happening in the detention centers, those should stop. Because at the end of the day, all these institutions who have been set up to ensure that what had been happening would never happen again. So until all this is achieved, to me, it will then be a new Gambia for me. Until when closure is being given to victims of enforced disappearances, those who lost their loved ones, you know, at least get closure. So that is when I could gladly say, yes, Aissatou Jammeh had finally have her new Gambia. And then I believe that every Gambian who is listening out there would agree with me that Gambia, we've been through so much gruesome human rights violations. Women, girls, men, women, men were being, you know, victimized. Kids lost their fathers, some lost their uncles, some lost their brothers. And I think all these people, because of all these people, we had a change of government because they put their lives at stake to ensure that dictatorship ends in Gambia. So I believe that when all these things are achieved, then I would gladly say that it's a new Gambia for me. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, with a very, very brilliant and a great way and powerful way to close your statement. Aissatou, thank you so much. And I come to you, Senabu. What would be your last take?
Thank you, Aisha. I think she has just reminded us that the work is not ending time soon, because all of these TJ mechanisms would come to an end, and it would be up to civil society and the populace to advocate for the implementation of all of these recommendations by the CRC, the TRC. But I think at least we have taken a little bit of steps forward to making sure that what happened never happens again. Like Aisha said, a lot of people have been violated. For example, my brother was killed in 2006. In 2006, we did not know, but it came to light with the TRC. So all of these mechanisms are very important in the transitional justice process. And after they elapse, this is where we come in as Gambians, as civil society, to be able to stand there and make sure that all of these recommendations made by all of these institutions that are set up are implemented by the government. So I urge every one of us to be able to take part in this process. And also, I would want to ask CRC or the NAMS to make available a copy of the draft constitution to everyone, especially the schools, kids going to schools, because some people, we know not everybody is learned. Kids going to school, they should, at least I think they should include it in their curriculum for now, to teach the kids what the draft says. They can relate these things to their mothers and back home, their parents, their sisters, their brothers. This will also help in the awareness raising. So I think making available copies of the draft, you know, keeping the awareness raising going, and, you know, just vigilance, keeping up the dialogue as well, and perseverance from everyone would help improve the Gambia to be a better nation.
Very well, great one. I say, Nabu, thank you so much for your brilliant comments, for your take on this particular issue. And unfortunately, like I mentioned at the beginning, we were unable to have the Honorable Member Yakuma Jaita with us. I'm sure it would have been even more interesting on board, but hopefully IRI can organize another town hall where we can have her or another member to be here with us live direct and talk to us about their own perspective as a lawmaker and what they're definitely looking forward to in this process. We all have a role to play, myself as a media person, a journalist, yourselves as women rights advocates, as, you know, people who are part of the constitutional or the transitional justice process. We all have a role to play. And those of you who've been watching as well in the comment section, the people, the masses, we all have a role to play in this. Now I'll urge each and every one of you to grab a copy of the draft constitution. It's available online. You can just check it out. The CRC has done a great job by making it very easy and accessible to all of us, so that nobody will stand to blame another. So before we reach the referendum, there is a whole lot of processes that will be taking place, and already some have already passed, which included the release of the draft that happened last year, and the final submission of the draft also happened this year in March. And just like I mentioned, the first publication of the bill was in Gazette in May, and we're expected to have a second publication of the bill in Gazette in 3 months, 3 months after the first publication. So 3 months after the first publication, in August, we're expected to have the second publication. And then after that, 10 days later, it will need to be introduced to the National Assembly, the bill to say, and that would be right about second week of September this year. And then the bill in second reading should be supported by 75% of all NAMs, so that it will be referred by the Speaker to the Independent Electoral Commission for a referendum to be held within 6 months. So we expect the referendum to be held next year, and this could be around June, because there's no time limit to say, per se, within which the NA submits the draft to the IEC. This depends, like I said in the beginning, how long the NAMs take to finish their deliberations. But as it is, the referendum, we expect, or it's expected that 50% of the electorate should come out and vote. If 50% of the people do not come out and vote, that means a referendum cannot be. So you, the public, we, all of us, we need to come out and vote, because 75% of those votes are needed and need to be cast in order to pass the judgment of yes or no, and which one takes the overriding stand. So we all need to come out in our numbers next year. Before that, let's make sure we get a copy of the draft, so that the president can give his assent by next year, and we can repeal the 1997 Constitution and replace that by the 2021. And I believe all my panelists agree with me on that. Nodding means yes. So thank you once again, all of you, for taking time to this particular discussion. Hopefully we can come back again some other time to discuss in the local languages as put forward by commentators down there. And special thanks to IRI, which is the International Republican Institute, their country office in the Gambia, for the work they're putting in this reform agenda since 2017, with their partners, of course, which include USAID. I was Fatou Kambuloshi, your moderator for this discussion, and thank you once again, and bye for now.